Hello. So, most people have played the game Monopoly or have at least heard of it, and most people are aware of its incredible ability to destroy friendships. It could be because the people who play the game Monopoly are inherently evil, but it's more likely because there are so many rules and technicalities in the game. In fact, there are some situations in the game that aren't fully explained in the rules. All of this confusion can lead to contention and disaster and broken friendships. So, to save your friendships and actually have fun playing the game, watch this video with your game mates before you play your next game. I will highlight common breaches from the rules and specific quirks that can start arguments if they go unaddressed. Let's start by talking about 4 common house rules that are not in the official rules. First, there's the free parking house rule. Instead of free parking just being a free space like in the official rules, many people choose to have all of the money collected from taxes and fees pooled into the free parking space for the next person who lands there to collect. Another house rule is where you collect $400 instead of $200 if you land right on the go space. Third, there's a house rule where you get cash when you roll a 2, and this is also known as snake eyes. And there is also one house rule where instead of just buying properties from the start, you must complete a full lap around the board before you can buy a property. These house rules may seem fun, or even be fun, but they all make the game longer. The way to win Monopoly is to bankrupt all of your opponents, and these first 3 house rules all keep money in the game, delaying bankruptcies, extending the game. Too long of a game can make players more cranky, and in a game like Monopoly, extra crankiness is dangerous. So be sure to choose carefully when deciding on which house rules, if any, you'll choose to use. When it comes to properties, the most common deviance is when a player lands on a property and chooses not to buy it, or they just can't buy it, and the property remains unowned. When this happens, the property should immediately be auctioned off instead. Whichever player offers the most money for the property in the auction pays that price to the bank and gets the property. The original denier is still eligible to participate in the auction. Bidding starts at $10, and only if nobody is willing to fork over $10 does the property remain unowned. This auction system keeps the game moving. Next, when you own a property, you can mortgage it to borrow money from the bank at any time. When you mortgage a property, you can't collect rent from it, but you can borrow half of the price of that property from the bank. To unmortgage a property, you must pay back the borrowed money plus 10% of the mortgage value as interest. For example, if you mortgage New York Avenue, you can borrow $100. But if you want to unmortgage it later, it will cost you $110. The original $100 that you borrowed plus 10% in interest. $10 is 10% of $100, which is the mortgage value of New York Avenue. Newer versions of Monopoly do the math for you on the back of the title deed cards. If you own all of the properties in a colored set and there are no houses nor hotels on them, the rent charged is doubled. This is because you now have a monopoly and can charge more money, just like in real life. This raised rent applies even if one of the properties in the set is mortgaged. For example, if you land on Pacific Avenue and one person owns all of the green properties and has no houses nor hotels on them, you would owe them $52 instead of $26, even if, for example, Pennsylvania Avenue, another green property, is mortgaged. If you own 4 railroads and one is mortgaged, rent is still $200 on the unmortgaged ones. If you own both utilities and one is mortgaged, rent still costs 10 times the roll on the unmortgaged one. If you have a monopoly, like all of the green properties again, and all of the properties in that set are unmortgaged, you can buy houses and then hotels on these properties. You don't have to wait for your turn to buy houses or hotels. You can do it in between any opponent's turns as well. If you need to, you can tell your opponent to wait before taking their turn so that you can buy your houses and hotels. But you might want to say please to keep the peace. If you later want to sell the houses or hotels, you will only receive half of the price that you spent to buy them. One thing you cannot do is buy houses or hotels if there are none available. In Monopoly, there is a strict supply of 32 houses and 12 hotels. According to the official rules, you cannot buy a house if there are already 32 houses on the board, nor can you buy a hotel if there are already 12 hotels on the board. To buy a hotel, you must first have 4 houses on each property of the property set. If there are no houses available for you to get to 4 houses on each property, you cannot buy the hotels, even if there are hotels available and even if you have enough cash. If 2 or more players want to buy houses or hotels at the same time, but there aren't enough houses or hotels for everyone, then the houses or hotels go up for auction. This could happen, for example, if one player is replacing 4 houses with a hotel and there hadn't been any houses available beforehand. So if you're trying to build hotels to free up houses for your other properties, be aware that other players might also want to buy those houses, and that can force an auction. These auctions also start at $10. When you buy houses and hotels, you must do so evenly. For example, if you are buying houses on the red property set, you must have one house on Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois avenues before buying a second house on any of those properties. The same goes for selling houses or hotels. You must do it evenly. Lastly, on each property, you can only have up to 4 houses or 1 hotel. You cannot put 3 hotels on Boardwalk like my friend did against me in 2nd grade. Just like with buying houses or hotels, you can make or propose trades in between opponents' turns. You don't have to wait for your turn. You can trade properties, cash, and even get out of jail free cards. But technically you cannot trade any houses or hotels that are already on properties. These houses and hotels must first be sold to the bank by the owner before the properties they are on are traded to someone else. Also, if you trade for mortgage properties, you technically can't get them without paying the bank something. You either have to unmortgage them immediately or pay the interest, which would keep it mortgaged. For example, with New York Avenue again, if you acquired it in a trade and it was mortgaged, you would immediately pay the bank either $110 to unmortgage it or $10, which would leave it mortgaged. Later, if you hadn't unmortgaged New York Avenue and you would only pay the $10, you would still have to pay the full $110 to unmortgage it. Lastly, according to the official rules, though I've never seen it attempted, it is forbidden to lend money to other players. If you need cash, you can trade for cash, you can mortgage properties, or you can sell houses or hotels. If you cannot pay back a debt after mortgaging and selling everything, you are bankrupt and out of the game. When a player goes bankrupt to another player, for example because they owe them rent, they must first sell any houses and hotels. Then they must hand over all of their cash, mortgage properties, unmortgaged properties, and any get out of jail free cards to the player that they owe. If the person owed receives any mortgage properties, they must follow the same procedures as when getting a mortgaged property in a trade. You cannot trade with a third party to avoid bankruptcy. If this were allowed, another player could offer to trade with you so that the player you owe doesn't get all of your properties. This could happen repeatedly and make the game drag on. If for some reason the person you owe is willing to negotiate with you so that you don't go bankrupt, then that is okay, but it does extend the game. Now when a player goes bankrupt to the bank by landing on income tax or luxury tax as a result of a chance or community chest card, or for not being able to pay to get out of jail, it is a little different. In this case, no trades are allowed to avoid bankruptcy. The bankrupt player gives all of their cash, houses, and hotels to the bank, and all of their properties are immediately placed up for auction. The rules do not specify in which order to auction off the bankrupt player's properties. I would first do the colored properties in board order from Mediterranean to Boardwalk, then the railroads starting with Reading, then the utilities starting with Electric Company. The rules also do not specify if there is a minimum bid for these auctions. I would just say that it is $10, and if nobody bids, it becomes unowned. Get out of jail free cards are returned to the bottom of the chance or community chest deck. And lastly, if you go bankrupt when you owe multiple players money, which only happens on this specific chance card, I would play as if you went bankrupt to the bank instead of to a specific player. This is my recommendation, but it is also not specified in the official rules. There are many ways to end up in jail, but no matter what, on your way to jail, you never collect $200 for pass and go. When you go to jail, your turn ends right there. To get out of jail before your next turn, you can pay $50 or use a get out of jail free card and then start your turn as usual. If you use a get out of jail free card, return it to the bottom of the chance or community chest deck. You can also take your chances at rolling doubles. If you don't succeed, your turn ends and you stay in jail. You can then pay to get out of jail, use a card, or try to roll doubles again on your next turn. If you fail to roll doubles after 3 turns, 1 attempt per turn, you must pay $50 and then travel the number of spaces indicated on the dice from your third roll. You can technically no longer use a get out of jail free card here to get out. If you successfully roll doubles within the 3 attempts, you can and must leave jail freely and move your token the number of spaces indicated from your roll. After that, your turn is over. You don't roll again like you normally do after you roll doubles. And lastly, this may seem odd, but while in jail, you can still collect rent, buy and sell houses, mortgage or unmortgaged properties, and make trades. After doing the action assigned from a chance or community chest card, you must replace the card at the bottom of the deck. Do not shuffle these cards during the game, only beforehand. If a card sends you to a location besides jail, go to that location clockwise and collect $200 if you pass go. Don't miss out on that $200. If you draw a card that charges you based on the number of houses and hotels you own, what you owe is based on the amount of houses and hotels you own when you pick up that card. You can, however, sell these very houses and hotels to pay this fee. Finally, a few miscellaneous but important things to mention. Technically, the rules state that property owners must specifically ask for rent when their properties are landed on, and that they must ask for this rent before the next player rolls the dice. I might just omit this rule and make payment required unless the property owner decides otherwise, but this rule could certainly keep you on your toes. Either way, you definitely want to be on the same page with your Monopoly companions before you start the game. Another thing, though there are limited houses and hotels, the bank has infinite money. It's like the government, apparently. So if there's no more paper cash in the bank, you should use something else to represent the money needed. Lastly, on older versions of Monopoly, the income tax space offers you two options: pay $200 or 10%. I would eliminate the 10% option, just like newer versions of Monopoly already have. 10% gets complicated because it is not only based on the amount of cash you have, but your total assets, which takes time and careful math to figure out. With enough complicated rules, getting rid of this 10% option will serve you well. After highlighting and clarifying these details and technicalities, you and your Monopoly companions are ready to decide on any rule modifications you want to make to the official rules. After that, you'll be ready to play. Keep this video handy so that you can reference it during your game. And if you have further questions, I would start by checking the manual included with your game. Finally, I have two questions for you. 1, what happened the last time you tried playing Monopoly? And 2, would this video have helped? Let me know in the comments, and I invite you to subscribe. Happy playing!